Welcome back. In this chapter number 3, we will be creating these VFX that you see on the screen. That will be in the shape of some Niagara systems. We start by making this blue version that you see there, like right here. And then we will quickly tweak it into a red, green, yellowish version and then a rainbow version. What we're trying to accomplish here, as a reminder to anyone who might have not seen the previous videos, is we already have created these VFX planes, which are material graph work that we covered in the previous chapter of this tutorial series, so check them out. And we now want to create these Niagara VFX in order to combine them together into something like what you see over there on the screen, like this. This is what we have created together on the left, the blue one. And by the end of this chapter, we'll create the blue Niagara and add it here, which essentially would result in to this. So this is what we'll be creating. Okay. And a quick refresher for anyone who is new and just tuned in. Maybe you don't have any context as to what we are making in this long tutorial series. Well, what we're creating is this gateway. We've already created the mesh for it that you see on screen. We've created the plane on which the Vortex material graph work goes. We created the material graph work last chapter, and now we're making the VFX with the caveat that we'll also create this, where like I think it goes on the screen. We'll make these different versions, and also you see how it teleported me from one location of the map to another underground location. We'll handle that and the logic and the blueprints in one of the next chapters. So keep watching in order to learn how to do that. And we will also make this where we go and we just find ourselves that's not meant to happen. I don't know why our character flung themselves like that, but this essentially loaded an entirely different level. So we level stream from, let's say, level A to level B. I will show you how to do that as well, but again in the next chapters. So let's begin by creating the files that are necessary for this VFX. So I have this folder called tutorial, which we made together with you in previous chapters. Let's go in there, right click, create a new folder within the folder and call it VFX. That's how I like to name my stuff. In the VFX folder, we will right click and create a Niagara system. From here, there's like fountain grid locations and all kinds of other different types. Let's begin with directional burst. Cool. So for name, let's go NS for Niagara system and then underscore and then blue portal burst. It's not really burst. Let's just call it like vortex, because after all, there will be some particles in there that are sprites, and then there will be a ribbon which makes that inwards vortex movement that you see on the screen right now. So I'm trying to be descriptive with my naming conventions. And we open that up. So we have it on screen right here. Let's expand it. And let's see, where shall we start? So first off, something that I like changing when I'm doing Niagara work is here. I want to change my background by clicking this up here. And from the previous scene profiles, I have some custom ones like this one that turns it black. I'm not sure you would have that, but you should have gray wireframe, for example, and gray ambient, especially if you're like on these newer versions. So click here, change from Epic headquarters to gray wireframe, because this way we can actually see a bit better what is going on. Cool. Next up, let's see some of the basics of what we're trying to accomplish. I have this on the other screen, my other screen, and this is what I'm looking at. This is my original work that I'm kind of like going to recreate together with you right now. By the way, I don't know why gray wireframe does... Oh, because it's wireframe and I guess it gives red wires. The final effect should be looking like this. And now I'm worried that maybe you don't have it and we don't really like this. So you know what, like let's create a profile really quickly together. So click here, preview scene settings. It shows up here. And then click here at the bottom where it says Add Profile. It creates a new one. The new one by default will have the Epic Headquarter panorama thingy. So on your new one, click Show Environment Off and click Show Floor Off. It already looks very sensible, if I'm being honest, and we could do with this. I'm going to name it Tooth Profile, just so I know that this is what we're doing together. And here, I'll probably not go black, but I'll go like darkish, like this. Okay, cool. And that profile is now saved, and if we're here, we can always switch to it. So yes, and then details to get us back to seeing the things how they should be. So cool, but back to the effect itself. Here I have a spiral ribbon, this is what I've called this. And when I isolate it, you can see that this is the inward motions of this ribbon and these dots that we have there. So we'll make that into our effect. Next up will be these, which are kind of like these particulates flowing in the air. They get spawned in a sphere shape location, which is lovely. And then there's like a bit of turbulence and forces like moving them inwards. And then finally, I have also added a more spiraling version of these same tiny particulates, but those really have a vortex motion. Like, I mean, everything has vortex motion in here, but perhaps you can see how they really are going crazy for it. So yeah, these are essentially the things that we're doing together. I will run you through these three different particle subsystems in our Niagara system, so you can create your own. So first off, let's click on the blue here and change a few preliminary settings that are kind of important for having the visual that we want. The first thing that I want to do after clicking here is I want to change my loop duration from 1 second, you can see it reflected down here, to 8 seconds. Cool. And then the loop behavior, I don't want it once, I want it infinite. Okay, that's good. I think the size of this didn't change once we changed this, but don't worry about that. It is not a problem. Next, do we change anything else? So those are the settings that we do here. Next up, let's click on the directional burst and let's call it, I want to rename it, right click, rename emitter. I will call it inward dots. Okay, cool. Now that we have these inward dots, I want to start changing them into these particulars that were flowing in the air. I think I'll start there. And to do that, let's first change our properties. So we change our emitter to be not on the CPU, but to be happening on the GPU. Okay, I'm doing that because the GPU ones will enable us to do a bit more here and there. And also I want to reuse this system a bit later in order to make a version of it that goes onto the UI using this plugin. We'll look into it a bit later. And anyway, the way that plugin works is it requires for the VFX that we have to be GPU instead of like CPU. Cool. Next up, I changed to fixed calculate bounce mode, and I'm going to leave these. I'll actually expand them a tiny bit because I don't want the effect like essentially disappearing too early. By too early, I mean not time-wise, but I mean with the player going away from it. You can change these bounding boxes and change your settings here in order to kind of like optimize your stuff, your VFX later on, but I won't be doing that now. We'll try to like just get us the visual that we want. I will tick local space. That is important because I want this emitter to happen in its own kind of like subspace, which means that when I take this VFX and I put it in the blueprint of my portal, with me rotating the VFX the direction of the particulates and the ribbons will remain. Instead of like it being kind of like binded to the world space, it will be binded to like a local space. So that's cool. So we changed to GPU and it immediately kind of like gives us a few errors. That is okay though, because I will actually just completely revamp a lot of the stuff that we're seeing here in a moment. Okay, so I think because I want to get out of this compilation error quicker, I think I'm going to delete everything here. So select it and then remove this. Can I delete multiple? Yes, no. So I essentially will delete everything because I want to start with you from scratch. And I'll rename these from spiral ribbons. So let's name these spiral ribbons after right clicking. And that will essentially be this. So right now we're making those. Cool. So we've deleted everything, and what we want to do first is in emitter update. In emitter spawn we don't need anything. In an emitter update we click here and we say emitter state. Here we leave it as it is for a second, and then next we click again in emitter update and we say spawn rate. In the spawn rate, after clicking on it, we want to spawn 235 for now. And that essentially is our emitter update build up. We have just this crazy large bell right now, but we'll fix it. Next up, we want to go into particle spawn here and click on the green dot. And let's begin with initialize particle. Initialize particle, perfect. And the settings for our initialized particle is a lifetime of 3 seconds. By the way, here we're in the Niagara log. I'll click on timeline so I can see back this stuff. So we want 3 seconds direct set, and the color mode I want to be random hue, saturation, and value. Okay. And for color, I'm going to use this from my other work. This one, it's like a bluish hue. You can copy it off the screen. I'll put the hex on screen as well. And for hue shift range, I'm going to leave it as it is. But I discovered that if I put saturation and value that are between 0.8 and let's say 170, it starts to kind of like randomize the different ribbon colors. We can't visualize it here because we're not moving it in space, so it's just a giant dot that's right in our face. But see how it swapped color right there? It will be swapping color while rotating, which is really cool. For the value range, I go from 0.8 to 0.11. And for the sprite size mode, I go random uniform. And I go from these default settings because I like them. The rest we leave as it is. So this here will deal with this sprite renderer, and in a moment or two we'll add a ribbon as well, but we will not be changing its settings from here. By the way, this initialized particle, it essentially gives us control over the sprite, the mesh, and the ribbon. Those are the 3 different types of things you can spawn here. For this specific effect, we like a sprite, which is the dot, and we like the ribbon, which will be the lines. So that is perfect. In the particle spawn, I'll click here, and next I'll say rotate around point. Okay, cool. And for the rotate around point, I will go here in the rotation phase, and I will click on this dot. It's not a dot, it's a downwards looking arrow. And I will look for waveform, okay? And the settings for my waveform will be as they are, 1, 0, and then 1 here. But in the waveform 1, sorry, these were the settings of the waveform count and the rotation phase. But in the waveform 1, we go to settings that are sine 1, 1. Well, essentially we leave them all as they are, okay? Because we like this waveform essentially generates a sine wave. If you look at it and imagine it from like 2D perspective instead of like this 3D world, it goes up and down like this. But then with the other settings that we're giving it, we are telling it while we are going up and down like this, also please go inwards or outwards on another axis. And that's how through a sine wave, we actually accomplish this like circular motion that we'll see in a moment. Perhaps a bit hard to understand the way I just explained it, but I believe you will understand in a few minutes when we visualize it. So in the setup of this rotate around point, we have the waveform as it is and as we want it. But here we want to change a few settings. We want to change the radius from 1 to 100, and see we immediately start to get a bit of action. And now we are seeing this like circle being generated, which is really cool. And for the rotation center, we leave it as it is. All of the settings here, we leave them like we like them. So there's no need to change anything, which is perfect. I clicked on this, but that was irrelevant. So that is the rotate around point done for us. As I said, on a sine wave, it adds this dot, this sprite, and because we are not moving it yet, we are not actually visualizing the sine wave. It ends up looking like a circle, which is how it should look. Next up, we click on the particle spawn plus icon, and we say gravity force. Cool. Now for the gravity force, it tells us immediately that there is an issue. It's actually expecting it is dependent on another module as well, and we don't have that module yet, so it gets confused. But if we just click fix issue, it will just give us apply initial forces and solve our forces and velocity. There we go. It added this apply initial forces right after gravity force, and that fixed our issue. And in the gravity force settings, I want to go on the red axis, the X. I want to go -20, okay? Then I want to make sure that I'm in coordinate space that is not world, but instead is local. This has to do with that explanation I had at the beginning, where like we want to be doing these effects in its own cluster of space instead of the world space. So when we're rotating it around in a blueprint, it has the behavior that we want. Next up, apply initial forces that we auto-added. It doesn't need any changes. It just works as it is. And next up is where the real fun begins, okay? So in particle updates, we click the plus and we look for particle state under lifetime. With the particle state, we don't really do anything, but just kill the particle when the lifetime has elapsed, which essentially means this initialized particle says your lifetime is 3 seconds, and this particle state just tells it if these 3 seconds have elapsed, please just be removed. And by the way, to quickly explain here, this is the lifetime and just a single sprite being killed, okay? That's why you're not seeing this entire thing disappear after 3 seconds. While it's running, a particle will show up, it will have a life of 3 seconds, short-lived, but then it will die, and then after it dies, another one will show up, but they don't wait on one another for spawning, they spawn all the time, and that is why we end up with a circle that looks like this, instead of like all of them dying at the same time and us being able to perceive it. Next up, click the plus again under particle update and say scale sprite size. Okay. And for the scale sprite size, I want to essentially, with the lifetime going through, I want to be changing this. I see it already like got these settings and started doing this thingy, which we couldn't see before. So it's kind of like working already, which is cool. But what I really am doing is like I keep the 0 here, I keep the 1 there, and then right here in the 0.5 in the middle, I I right click to add key. And that key that I've just added, I want it to be 0.20, no, excuse me, actually, want to click on the one at the end first, because I told you that I keep them as it is, but that is not true. And on it, I want to change the key data second value to 0.1 to get it down there. And then the value of this one here, I want to be changing to 0. So select this, and the second value change to 0.275. So in the middle, 0.5, 0.275, perfect. At the start, it will be 0, yes, and at the end, it will be 1 and 0, 1. And I don't know why it appears like this. The visualization is not how I'm expecting it, but these are the values, so let's roll with it. Cool. And now next up is, as I promised, the real fun. So we click here on particle update to add, and we say Vortex Force. Vortex Force immediately tells us that after it, we need to solve these forces and velocity. So that's why we get the issue. We click fix issue and it solves it for us here, which is perfect. And now you can see that the thing just went crazy and immediately started doing stuff. If I look down on the z-axis, because that's the settings we've put, you can see this thing happening. And maybe now you can see what I meant when I was explaining to you the sine wave. It is in 3D space, so perhaps a bit harder to see, but if you look there, you can actually kind of spot this going up and down spawning. And while it's doing that, it's also getting pushed downwards. And that is what makes this effect. And it's kind of like pretty sweet. We click on the Vortex Force, and here we start tweaking stuff. Vortex Force amount, we want to go minus 200. And then we want to do a swap in the vortex axis. I will change from 0 to -1, and this I'll keep to 0 and 0. And now what I accomplished here is nothing for the time being. I mean, I'm switching and moving the vortex force into a different axis now, but it's not exactly the way we want it, so give it a moment. For origin pole amount, we're going to go for 250. We'll leave that as it is, and then vortex origin offset we'll say is local, okay, and we'll say -295, okay, and I'll leave that to 0 and 0, and then use influence fallout yes, and I'll say 1000 instead of 100, and I'll keep that to 1, and invert influence fallout I'll tick off. And that's that. In here we will put a speed limit of 100. In here I mean solve forces and velocity, and that immediately made it a bit more manageable, because before it was doing like crazy stuff. And now we get this. And this is not how it's meant to look. It's meant to look like this. My settings are all the same, because as I said in 5. Okay, let's think about this. Actually, let's go in the world and let's drag this in. Okay, so we can see that the red axis is forward, which is the same as the other. Okay, so we have a lot of the stuff done, but we have the wrong settings on the axis. So yours might look similar to mine now, but even if it doesn't, we'll fix it in a second. What you want to know though is that while we are rotating here, rotate so this x-axis is pointing on your left. We want x to be over forward in this system. That is how I made it for the blueprint, so it should work. And you can see that right now it's kind of going in an upward movement up and to the right. So we want to fix that. So yeah, have the x like this, and with a preview like that, go to the rotate around point settings here. And we missed to change something down here under the setup, which is why it was wrong. Let's go on x-axis 0, 1, 0, okay? And you immediately see things changing a bit. And then the y-axis should be 0, 1, 1. Cool. And if you put those settings and you're sure that your gravity force is local at -20 and your vortex force is then -200, -1 for vortex axis, and then origin pull amount is 250, while the origin pull is this ticked on, and then -295 for vortex origin offset, you immediately start getting this visual, which is really cool because that is what we are after. So we can actually visualize a lot of the stuff we did finally because it's a bit more readable. If we save and then we drag that into the world like so, you'll now see that the arrow that is green and visualizing the forward of our particle system, which is why we were going for the x-axis, is correct. And in this case, if I were to rotate it like my other stuff, -180, you see that it goes actually in a motion backwards. And it's kind of close to the origin over there already, which is really cool. The only difference is right now we're rendering only these sprites, while what we're after is to add a ribbon as well. So next up, let's add a ribbon. So to add a ribbon, we want to click here. How do we add the ribbon? Actually, I'm not too sure. Let's find out together. I think, yes, under renderer, you click the plus and we want a ribbon renderer. Cool. And then for the ribbon renderer, we use the default ribbon material. By the way, our other sprite is also default. In it, do we need to change any settings? Let me check. Yes, so let's go from material, under the material user param, let's use source mode instead of particles. No, that's okay. The alignment, no, that's okay as well. So the facing mode of our sprite renderer change to face camera, okay? The rest of the settings, they stay as it is. It is fine. Under the ribbon renderer, let's change those settings. We want use GPU initiate ticked on. And here we want the segment to be like a bit higher, let's say 6. And yeah, look at that. Very cool. Save. And the first part is done. We have a ribbon and it's colorful and it's pretty. And by the way, let's play for a moment. So let's go to the rotate around point. Let me visualize to you what I meant when I was explaining the entire thing with the sine wave going up and down. So changing the frequency here introduces a lot more of these. And we can start defining like this cone shape, which is pretty cool. And this is useful because in the other colored versions, we actually swap those settings a bit. You can have a play with all of this, by the way, and tweak this entire VFX to something that you love and is something like of your own. Cool. So can I do this, by the way? Yes, let's drag this up to like 8. Just so it's not as short. You don't need to be precise here, but just so it doesn't reset nearly as quickly here in the viewport. We should have done that by the start, but that's okay. Perfect, so our spiral ribbons is done. Next up, let's reuse this location-based ribbon and turn it into these. So if I disable these, look at that. These are kind of like really cool. I love them. Let's make those next. We can isolate for a moment. No, actually, let's keep it both on like that. By the way, when you isolate a thingy, it turns it just on its own. If you click isolate on another one, it also ticks it on, so you're now isolated on these two. Imagine there was a third one, it will just keep these two on, the third off. But the moment you disable any isolation, it just has the entire system on, which is why it turns these colors. I'm thinking actually let's work them together. So location-based ribbon, right-click, rename emitter, say inwards dots. And let's do what we did before, just so it's easy. So click on the entire system, and here every setting starts to get listed, and let's just delete them, you know, like let's start from a blank state. Perfect. And with the blank state, we first want to change the render and click and add Sprite renderer. Cool. And the settings for Sprite renderer. So we just want to say facing mode to face camera. This is under the Sprite renderer that we just added. Everything else is as it should be. We have this BCPU, so we want to change. We want to click on the properties and go GPU SIP. We want fixed bounds of the settings that we set before. Just pump up the zeros from 100 to 1K. Not very optimized, but we just want to be seeing it. Requires persistent IDs, yes. Everything else is as this. Click on the emitter update, and we already have emitter state that I forgot to delete, but that is okay. We will have it be system and system. And next, let's click on the plus on the emitter update, and let's say spawn rate. For spawn rate, we're going to say 80. So we're now spawning 80 of them, and that's why it's shining like that, a bit crazy. I think this is bugged, by the way, because this preview should be this default sprite material. So I don't know why it's giving us that. But let's not worry. That's done. Particle spawn. Let's say initialize particle. Initialize particle. And let's do the same thing that we did with the other one, where like lifetime will be 3. The color mode will be random hue, saturation, and value. And for color, we're just gonna click on our other one in the initialize particle, and we'll right click, copy, and we'll go in initialize particle here, and we will paste. Cool. The x values we leave as they are, but here we put 170, and down here we put 0.11. So it immediately kind of like colors it like the rest of the stuff, which is perfect. The sprite size, we say random uniform, and we go from 5 to 10. That works, the default ones. And now let's start moving things around and having a bit of fun. So click on the plus under particle spawn and say add velocity. It immediately tells us that it is dependent on another piece, which should be, I believe, solve forces. Yes, it says here solve forces, also apply initial forces. So click fix issue, and yeah, it added us what we needed. Now in the add velocity, we want to be adding it in a cone, okay? And we want the velocity speed to be really minuscule, 0.96. The cone axis will be left as it is, while the cone angle will go for 852. Cool. And the inner cone angle will be 458. Cool. We leave the angle mode to degrees. We don't care about any of the other stuff. And here, the rotation mode we keep as it is. Click plus on the particle spawn, and let's look for shape location. Well, look at that. It immediately starts doing like a spherical spawning, which is really cool. We're kind of starting to define this shape, and it's really nice. I want to move that to be right after add velocity though. And at the end, I want it to be applying initial force. And here for settings, I want to keep it to sphere that is 100. I want to keep it to random, where the sphere surface is 0.41. And I want to have a hemisphere distribution of 2.58 to 1. Okay. That essentially means now in the inward parts of the sphere, we aren't spawning nearly as many particles as we are on the surface of this like imaginary sphere. So you can see how it now appears kind of less dense, which is really cool. They're a bit large, but we'll fix them in a second. Next particle spawn, we look for gravity force. And we move the gravity force, because otherwise it's going to give us an error, to be right after the shape location and before the apply initial force. Here, for gravity, we go similarly to before, -20, and we change this to 0. We expand, and we go from world to local space. So similar to what we were doing before. And we've actually built up the particle spawn now, and that's everything that we needed for the particle spawn. Now we just need to start setting the size of the sprite so they're not these giant orbs, and we need to start like moving them inwards and in ways that we want. And all of that happens after the particles have been spawned, while they're being updated and their state is changing, which is why we continue working in the particle update. In the particle update, the first thing we look for is particle state. And that essentially, again, will tell it to be killed by the end of the 3 seconds that we set at the start. And then we wanna do scale sprite size by clicking the particle update plus. And oof, I love that. Really cool. Here what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave these as they are, and we'll do work really similar to what we were doing before. So this is left 0, 0. The last key changes from 1 to 1 and then 0.1. So they're like these tiny ones, look at them. They're like tiny stars. I love it already. And we want to right click right there in the middle where it says 0.5 and add a key. This key we want to drag up, okay? So they start tiny, they then become a bit bigger, and then they start being smaller again just right before they die, which is kind of sad, but also beautiful in a way. So we select here, and in the 0.5, we want a value of 0.25, because we don't want to have them like giant, you know, we want more of this. Yeah, that is really, really cool already. Very pretty and very, I don't know, beautiful, and kind of like, it does feel like you're staring at stars, which gives me a bit of inner peace, which I really like. I don't know if that's bizarre to say, but I hope you feel that inner peace as well. But let's continue. On the particle update, we add Vortex Force. Perfect. And now it tells us the usual stuff. When you're applying forces or doing like some type of physics, you need to tell it what you want to do, but then you need to solve it. You need to solve the equation, so to say. So we're missing that. We can either click fix issue, or we can click on the plus and say solve forces and velocity, which immediately fixes our compilation error. And if we had inner peace before, now there's a lot of turbulence. These things are going in every direction, but again, still beautiful in a way. Let's click on the Vortex Force and let's change settings. So we want them to be like circling and going in, not like kind of like spilling outwards like they are right now. So for Vortex Force amount, we're gonna go -200. Okay. For the axis, we'll go -1, 0, and then the 1 we're going to change to 0 as well on the blue axis. For vortex axis coordinate space, we leave it to simulation. And now here in the origin pool amount, we go 250, and that is what makes it kind of like go inwards. It's still spilling outwards way too much. We'll fix that in a second. We go with vortex origin offset, and we change it to local. And then we change this number to -294 or 95, whatever, which essentially, by the way, is the same number that we were using on the spiral ribbons, because you can probably guess, but like we want it going into kind of like the same inwards motion. We want to use fallout influence, and for that we're gonna add a 0 and go from 100 to 1k, and we'll invert the influence fallout. And that made all of it really slow down and look a bit more peaceful. It was a bit hectic and chaotic before that. When you're making VFX, yes, like you want a lot of motion and a lot of turbulence and interest, but sometimes when there are a lot of moving pieces, like there are here, we already have this ribbon going inwards, you want to complement the motion of the ribbon, which has like relatively fast speed, with something a bit slower, like these dots and particulates that we just added. So for a successful VFX, keep that in mind. Complement the motion of your different pieces and vary them. Don't have everything thrown into the player eyes at the highest speed ever, because then the chaos becomes a bit too much and the visuals look overwhelming and unrealistic in a way, even though we're making something stylized here. That is our inwards dots created. So let's hit save and let's take a look at it. Yep, there it is. Looks like that. The other one over there looks like that because I've isolated it. So let's stop isolating. There we go. That is done, and the only thing we're missing are the purple dots. So we're actually going to imitate these inward dots and create another layer of effects on top. So in order to do that, I'm thinking, by the way, let me save this and restart it for a second. Yeah, so I restarted my window, and that, by the way, updated this here. Also, my window is lagging now, so let's do this. My window is still lagging now. Now I regret that I restarted. Okay, there we go. I restarted the window, and that solved the bug that I was mentioning a moment ago, if you remember, where I was saying, oh, why is my sprite renderer, which is a dot, getting a preview over here, which was a ribbon instead? Well, yeah, restarting the thing fixed it. It didn't affect the visual, but it was just annoying. Cool. Okay. Next up, so we have the blue particulates. I want to create purple ones, and I want to give them a tiny bit of a different motion. For that, I'm thinking of selecting the inward dots, Ctrl-C, and then Ctrl-V. And we get inward dots 001. Right click, rename emitter, and let's call them torus dots. The reason I'm calling them that instead of purple is, yes, they will be purple, but the key difference is in their movement compared to the inward dots. And the other thing is that I'll not be spawning them on a shape location that is a sphere. Instead, it will be a torus. So on the torus dots, let's start from the top again. These settings don't change. The emitter state, the spawn rate will change from 80 to 100. Make sure that you're editing the torus dots, not the other one, by the way. Initialize particle will be where we change the color, and for color I want from this to this. Okay, so you can copy that color off the screen, and oh my god, look at that. I just love it already. It looks so pretty as it is, but yeah, we'll want to change the motion a bit because right now they're kind of overlapping over one another. But you can see already that this purple gives it a bit of a punch. Before, it was kind of a monochrome. Not really, it was two chromes. It was the blue and the greenish. Well, blue and teal and aqua, like there were a few colors there going on already, but they were a bit flat when they were against this, against the bluish and the aqua colors, the Vortex. So I thought, you know what, like it needs a bit of a different color, and that's when I introduced the purples, which I think you can really see them as an extra layer of effect on top, which is lovely. And anyway, the initialize particle settings all stay the same. We changed the color, which was the important part. And then for shape location, that is like the next really important thing, is we want to change from sphere to torus, as I mentioned before. And our torus settings are going to be large radius will be 122 and handle radius will be 11. Okay, and you already can see kind of like the motion change. This has a specific beauty to it as well, by the way. So I encourage you, this is your art. I'm just trying to show you stuff here. Make sure to experiment and kind of like create your version of this VFX. You don't need to do exactly what I'm doing. Maybe do it for now and then by the end revisit these settings and change them a bit. Cool, so scale, rotate, offset is kept like that, and the non-uniform scale will be as it is, but for rotation mode we want axis angle, and the axis angle will be 100, which is correct. It immediately essentially rotated our torus. Like if this was the particle system and the torus before was like this, it rotated it to be parallel. So it kind of like is cool now. The kind of gap of the donut, because a torus is a donut essentially, is now there in the middle. And the offset mode, we go to default. And in the offset, we go -51. And we leave it to 0, and the simulation to as it is simulation. So yes, now we're spawning on a torus, but it's a bit offset and they're in the back because we copied from the inward dots, but we don't actually want, for example, the add velocity. So click it and then delete it. And we don't really want gravity forces, so click it and delete that as well. We want to preserve the apply initial forces because that otherwise will mess up some of our other stuff. And then sprite size, we want to select the middle point, click on that dot there, and from 0.25 instead go to 0.175. Cool. And the last point stays as it is, yes. And next up, Vortex Force, we want nothing changed here. Like it is perfect as it is. And then finally in here, we want to introduce a speed limit. Before there was none, but now we want it. So we click that and we knock out one of the zeros to get us from 1K to 100. And yeah, that is the VFX there. We'll test it in a second, but before I forget, let's click on the NS Blue portal Vortex. And here I made a change, okay? So like so what I did here was like I introduced, by the way, be careful when you slide this, because last time I slid this number around, I crashed. So don't slide in crazy ways, just click and press 0.9333. And that introduced like a bunch of stuff and didn't put the number that we wanted, but let's try again. Up there, well, warm up tick count, let's put 14. And that changed it to 0.933. So the reason we're doing this is because when, let's go back to the lagging level, I apologize. When you have this and you copy and drag it to the side, if you don't have a warm up, it will spend a second where it's actually invisible. That's when it starts. And it starts moving the particles around. And I kind of wanted to solve that. So when you make your blueprint and you drop your entire blueprint in here, I just want the VFX to be visible immediately. But yeah. And anyway, so that's most of the stuff done. But I'm seeing that, well, we're so laggy. I'm seeing that we have issues. So this is the original and this is what we made. And there's a wrong offset in our purple dots. So let's fix that. Okay, so Vortex Force, I put -200 here. So we're on torus dots, Vortex Force, change from -200 to -100. And save. And we're still wrong. But at least we fixed one thing that might have been different. Let's troubleshoot. We'll figure it out here. It's interesting because here it actually appears where it should, but in the world it doesn't. And I think that it maybe has to do with the fact that I rotated it. Yes, so that's good that it broke, because we can demonstrate fixing stuff like that together. It means that here, this emitter specifically has the wrong space. It's using like a world space somewhere. Oh yeah, I said. So when we select here the GPU emitter type, up here we forgot to tick local space on the invert dots, and we forgot to tick local space on the torus dots. So tick it on both, save, and that's that. They look identical now. This is what I made in the previous month. This is what we made here together. So perfect. Let's delete that. And yes, so that is that. We have this wonderful effect done. I hope you enjoyed these little sparks and stars. In the next video part, we will duplicate this blue thing and we will make the other colors. So we'll make together the red. We'll change our sine wave to make these weird circles for the green and yellowish version, and then we'll make the rainbow one. So stay tuned. Oh, okay. I think everything is a mess now, so let's just start over.